Hello, welcome back to another episode of Real Faith in the Real World. Today, we are going to hear from Pastor Kent King Nobles of Normal First United Methodist Church of Normal, Illinois, and retired Pastor Jim Bortell as we continue our series on the book of Luke.
Hello, this is Pastor Kent King Nobles. I'm here with my friend, colleague, and mentor, Reverend Dr. Jim Bortell. Jim, thanks for being willing to do this podcast with me. As you know, the church has been focusing on the Gospel of Luke for the last month. So we're coming toward the end of the book of Luke. This week, we will be focusing in our readings on the last chapters 19 through 24. Of course, this is Luke's account of the last week of the earthly life of Jesus. So, first question, if you don't mind, what do you find especially meaningful in these chapters of Luke?
Well, I think we have, with this is not original, but the four Gospels, and they are more like portraits than they are biographies. And as you know, a portrait reflects the painter's perception of a particular individual, and I think of the Gospels as that way. And for many of us, and for myself, Luke would be probably my favorite Gospel. I find so much in the others, but it would be my favorite.
Yeah.
And the way Luke has put these chapters together is he's including some last-minute instruction for his disciples, Jesus is doing that, and the listeners, and the stories have carried down 2,000 years. For instance, these are just a few of what is included as preface to the crucifixion and resurrection. The parable of the unjust judge, which is do not lose heart. Do not lose heart. And that's always pretty important for someone who's trying to follow Jesus' way of life. The Pharisee in the temple, who parades himself as a very pious man, in contrary to the other man who is very aware of his failures. And so Jesus, again, is emphasizing, as he did in so many of his stories and parables, the importance of countering spiritual pride, and a message that is relevant 2,000 years later.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Seems pretty timeless.
Yeah, it does. It's timeless.
Yeah.
And then the place of children, how the disciples even tried to quiet the children, and Jesus made that a message about caring for children, again, very relevant for today, and the need on the other side of that to learn childlikeness, that children are examples for us in spiritual matters, and how wealth can be a barrier to spirituality. Zacchaeus is one of the last individuals that are specifically named. And it's the enduring message of forgiveness, of the importance of change of life, and that change doesn't just stop at one point in a person's life and then you coast on for the rest of it. One of my teachers said, we're talking here about a permanent revolution of the heart and mind, invading all of life, all of our years. And how Jesus wept when he saw the city, and how we weep today when we see what's happening in our cities and in our world. And how also the scribes and the Sadducees and the Pharisees want to pick a theological fight. And how it seems to me religious bickering can sometimes be the last barrier between people and God. My mother had a saying, and I don't think it was original with her, that doctrines divide and duties unite. And I would add a little bit to that more than duties, love is supreme, and love unites. So it's marvelous way that Luke has set this up to kind of prepare us and prepare his disciples for what's ahead.
As you were talking, I was remembering what's attributed to Karl Barth, theologian. You should read the newspaper, in one hand and the Bible in the other hand.
Right.
Looking at the world. And as you were talking, I was thinking about so many stories from the news and how helpful it is to have these words of Jesus and instructions as we think about what do we make of all this we're seeing, and not losing heart. Very good. Is there anything you find unique or distinctive in the way the Gospel of Luke tells the events of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus?
They are. They are, as I said, unique is what you would expect if 4 different portrait painters were painting the picture of a person. They're all about the same things, but how the same things can be told in many ways, and that should not be some major problem for us. We would expect that with someone like the figure of Jesus. What we have in the Gospels are not photos, but we have portraits, and reading through them and these stories is always something new for us. And I read it again this week, which I haven't read for a while, and found the same thing.
Yeah, I think there's always a temptation to do this harmony of the Gospels.
Yes.
To take the 4 Gospels and put them together into one story. And you can even get books that do this for you. But I find it so much richer to try to forget the other 3 Gospels and focus on the one right in front of me and say, what is this saying to me? And give each one its chance to tell that story or the portrait. I like that image you have of the portrait.
Yeah, and you might they each may shade it a little differently, and that's helpful. Sometimes that shade helps you when you're encountering Jesus, the story of Jesus, in a little different way.
Yeah, sometimes you get some stories that aren't in one of the other Gospels.
Right.
Sometimes you get the same story, but just told in a different way or different details.
Yeah.
And you can be upset about that, like, how can it be different details? Or you can say, what's the meaning this one's giving to me? Or what is Luke offering, as he helps us understand who Jesus is. I love the story in Luke 21, too, about the offering the widow makes in the temple. What messages do you get from that little story? Or does that stand out to you in any way as we think about kind of our modern challenges?
Well, I think of it as faithfulness is most often probably practiced in small packages. And this woman who does not have the wealth, but she's giving from the heart. And most of the everyday challenges of the gospel to the way we live our lives are small, and we shouldn't discount them at all. That how important it is, to smile, to shake a hand, to give someone a word of encouragement, and that's just vital, I think, for everyday Christian discipleship.
Yeah, I get, and yet we do discount the small things so often, don't we? I think that's a really helpful point. And I know a lot of people, when they think about the world, they feel a little hopeless and feel like they want to change politics, in one big action, or change, bring people together, unite people who are so divided, or end war, or it's not very often that many of us get a chance to change the world in one quick, simple action, but each of us have the chance every day to do these small, faithful, giving things, and I do believe over time those add up.
I think of the people in my congregations through the years, and one in particular here. I was here in the 90s and a little bit into the next century. We had a woman who became part of our congregation. Juanita Newhouse was her name. She was 95, And if ever I knew a vibrant spirit, it was Juanita. And I remember especially a small thing, but how it stayed with me, that after church, I was at the same table where she was, and several people were drinking coffee, and they were talking about the times in which we were living. And one of them turned and said to Juanita, what were things like in your time? And she had this lovely smile, and she turned and she said, this is my time.
Whenever you're living.
That's helpful, especially any time, but when you're getting to be the age I am, this is my time.
This is your time, yeah. Good. One last question. Do you want to say anything about the death and resurrection of Jesus and what that means to you? Do these accounts give you hope as you live in the world today, or how do you think about them?
What we have in Luke and the other Gospels is what I would call resurrection in the past tense. The stories of the crucifixion and Easter morning. And the disciples, as we would expect, were very confused about what happened. So whenever Easter comes around and you're reading the Gospels or hear the Easter story, don't put yourself down for being confused, because you're in good company.
Right.
The reports are not always consistent, and that's true for something that's really important. They were surprised by joy, to use a book title, but I think they were surprised by their confusion, mostly. I'm not sure they knew how to put that together yet. And it's always, okay to find some confusion in yourself when you read the Easter lesson or lessons. The Emmaus story, which is only included in Luke, I believe, the Emmaus story, for me, shows a step to where we are today. The two disciples walking with this stranger on the road to the village of Emmaus and telling him about what had happened. And he seems, I can't remember exactly how to describe this figure's responses then, but it is only when they stop and ask him to stop and have something to eat with them that was in the breaking of the bread that they recognized who he was. So it seems to me that what we are doing, what Luke is doing, is going from a past tense story to more of a present tense story. Those disciples, I don't believe they were there on Easter morning, but they've heard about it. And it's moving from a resurrection past to the story of experiences. And those experiences can take many different forms. Ever after, Christ has entered into the varieties of religious experience for those who try to follow him. And they take many different forms, so that religious experience becomes all of the experience of a religious person. Anything, maybe, or everything is religious, is spiritual, and that's sometimes kind of hard to grasp. But it's not a puzzle to be solved. So it's about an experience to be lived. We know Jesus in so many different things. And sometimes, like with grief or failure or a challenge, we may sense that we were kind of coping alone, but then on the other side, we realize better how the resurrection life was carrying us through. The passage from Albert Schweitzer's Quest for the Historical Jesus has remained for me a really basic religious text. Schweitzer, who was a name well known to previous generations, about as well as anyone in the world, is probably not recognized by many today. But he was a biblical scholar. He was the premier Bach authority in the world. And then at the age of 30, he studied medicine and went to Africa, where he spent his well, he would come back sometimes to raise money for the project, but he spent most of his time in Africa. But in that book, The Quest for the Historical Jesus, it's a big, thick book. It's not easy reading, but he's trying to describe the 19th century approach to Jesus, which was to try to find and put together some kind of a biography. Mm-hmm. And the biographies come out more about the writer of the book than they do about Jesus. But the words, the concluding words of The Quest for the Historical Jesus are words that I memorized many years ago. He comes to us as one unknown, as he came to the disciples of old. He speaks to us the same word as he spoke to them, follow thou me. And to those who will follow, whether they be wise or simple, he will reveal himself in the toils and struggles through which they shall pass. And they will know in their own hearts and in their own experience who he is. Mm-hmm. I just find that so helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that meaningful. And it does seem like even today, most of us come at these stories with this kind of post-Enlightenment, modern, scientific category of thinking. And you know, I find myself doing this. Say, well, what are the details? I want to know the detail. And of course, the gospel writers like Luke, they're not that concerned with giving us. They tell us almost nothing about how the resurrection takes place. You know, we'd say, well, exactly how did it happen, or what would it be like today in scientific terms? And I think it really is more helpful to be able to say, what does this mean for me? Yes. You know, what is this all about? What does this mean for my life? And I have found that the death and resurrection of Jesus are very powerful for my life. You know, all of us experience death. All of us experience times when we feel like it's the end. And to just have the sense that God enters in, even in the midst of death, and transforms that into life, and that's what Jesus did. And of course, Luke is, as you mentioned, he's concerned with what's happening next, and he goes on to the whole book of Acts about how you live out the teachings of Jesus and the life of Jesus, and how this whole movement goes from death to resurrection to life. And so hopefully as people read those stories, they'll be able to relate to them with their own lives. So.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to have this conversation.
Well, I appreciate throughout the many years, Jim, your friendship, your leadership and mentorship, and your long years of faithfulness to the church. So thank you, and let's talk some more.
Okay, very good.
All
thank
right.
you.
We want to thank you for joining us today, and we hope you are blessed with this podcast. And remember that you are a blessing to everyone. Go in peace and have a fabulous week.